My name is Dominique Mohammed. I'm 29 years old. I'm from Portland, Oregon, and this past year, I've faced and defeated one of the toughest battles that I've ever faced in my life. When I was 20 years old, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma stage 4. I'm gonna bring on fellow cancer survivors to show you guys not only that you can beat any cancer, but that you can beat your zombie, whatever that is in life.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of BeastvsZombie. I have a special guest today, Miss Marina Blackford, host of the Beyond Cancer podcast with us today. Thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. Make sure before we get started to go follow on all social media platforms and make sure to go on Spotify and YouTube to see the full videos and stay up to date on new episodes. So let's get right into it. Miss Marina, how long has it been since you beat cancer?
Oh man, well, I've had two journeys with cancer, so it's been almost 4 years since the last time.
Okay, wow. And you had breast cancer, correct?
That's right. Yes, I had breast cancer twice when I was 31 and 36 years old.
Okay, and what kind of stage was the diagnosis each time?
Each time it was stage 2 due to the size of the tumor, but it had not spread, so I was at stage 2.
Okay, cool. And so what was some of the like? So I had cancer twice as well. I had cancer, and then I was in remission for 3 years, and then it came back, and I had cancer again, beat it again. What was kind of the differences between the first time you went through it and the second time?
Oh man. There was definitely less fear, I feel like the second time, just knowing I had an oncology team. Like I immediately knew when I felt a lump the second time with my recurrence, I knew who to call the next day, that they would be open and call and get in. I just was familiar with that process. So there was less fear surrounding that. Um, so I think that really helps a lot. I think that helps anybody on their cancer journey. Like, where do you start? Where do you begin?
Right. Yeah, that's definitely something I can relate to. I know the second time I had the reoccurrence, it was the same thing. I felt a lump in my neck again, and I knew exactly what to do, and I knew exactly what, like I could feel it in my body. I could feel what was going on. And so when I had that reoccurrence, I remember it was less fear, but it was almost how do you say it? It was almost like not true because it was actually harder the second time for me going through some of the side effects and stuff that I had going on was definitely kind of like punched me in the mouth a little bit there. Um yeah.
Yeah. I can relate. Like I say that almost with like some hesitation, less fear because fear like surfaces at different levels at different times. But I think just knowing like you had your doctors to go to and start, that process. But at the same time, I mean, anytime being told you have cancer is like just like the worst feeling, and there is kind of like the good thing of knowing how what to expect a little bit with symptoms, and at the same time like you're like I don't really I really wish you wouldn't wish it on anybody, let alone going through it again yourself.
Cool. And so when you were going through all this, what was the process? How were you treated and how did you ultimately overcome your cancer?
I was treated with chemotherapy and surgery, and the second time I also did radiation. So the type of breast cancer I had was a kind that is considered aggressive, triple negative, and it's usually treated with chemotherapy. So I know that's scary for a lot of people. I mean, first being told you have cancer and then being told you need to do chemo. I can speak from experience that it's not easy, but that it does kill cancer cells and you can come out cancer free by doing it. Having surgery Again, I got really used to that. I had a double mastectomy and lumpectomy after, removing breast tissue. So, as far as surgery goes, asking all your questions to your surgeons, what can I expect? How will my pain be managed? All of that is really important, being your own advocate. And then radiation therapy, ultimately, too, doing 30 of those. Again, asking a lot of questions. And I think they try to provide a lot of information before going into these
Mm.
therapies, so they'll have somebody check with you weekly on how you're feeling, and managing the symptoms of that. But that is what I did, and that's what got me to where I am, cancer free.
Okay, cool, cool. What kind of symptoms were you having trouble with while you were going through all of this?
I think the first, several, just not feeling like yourself, right? Just an absolute disrupt from what you'd call your baseline. I mean, you and I were young at diagnosis. I can tell you, I had just ran a marathon shortly before being diagnosed the first time, like literally about 2 weeks before. And it's the fastest I've ever ran in my entire life. I ran 8-minute miles for 26.2 miles to qualify for
Yeah.
Boston.
Wow.
And the next week, I went for a biopsy that came back positive for cancer. And so, how I ran my fastest marathon and was also growing a tumor was a total disrupt, So, chemo, I just viewed it as that. I kind of took my marathon training and said, because marathon training is not easy, right? It's really tough on the body and it requires a lot of self care. And so, I did the same with chemo. I did a lot of self care. I hydrated. I rested when I needed to. I ate well. I tried to fuel myself with stuff that would make me feel good. And that is a little tricky during chemo because your taste changes and your gut
Yes.
changes because of steroids they give you.
Right.
But constantly listening to your body was how I was able to manage those symptoms, being fatigue, nausea, hair loss,
Yeah.
and then all the
We
emotions.
both got our hair back.
Yeah, I love it. Your curls are natural, though. I like them. I got a curl to get these. Yeah, and dealing with all the emotions that come with that. Yeah.
Yes. Were you able to stay active during your treatments, going through cancer?
I was able to, but to a different degree. And this is where I think it's really important to lean into your current situation. If you're going through something medical or cancer, you have to know that you're not going to have the same energy. Like trying to fight it isn't really worth it to me looking back on it. So instead, kind of leaning into it is what I call. So, you know, a couple days after chemo, when I start to feel well, I might do some yoga and stretching. Usually did some daily walks because I felt like it helped me feel better. And then on the days right before going back to chemo, when I felt the best, is when I would do more of my running or exercise routine. So just kind of going with that flow. Yeah, if you fight it, your body will not let you. So just going with the flow.
Right. Man, and that, I know for me, it helped to stay as active as possible during the whole situation. I stopped lifting
Mhm.
weights, but I kept playing basketball as much as I could. I would also, there was periods of times when I could just go on walks as well. But, right, that was a way that I was able to still feel normal
Mhm.
during this like crazy time in my life. So that's really cool that you were able to still get a little bit of running in and
Yep.
still stay a little active. And I know that definitely helped overcome everything. It's
It did.
crazy. It's crazy. I have a buddy that had ran the Boston Marathon and then a month later he had got cancer. It's insane. It's like that's such a like a high to like a low, like so fast.
Yep.
And it sounds like you're in like some of the best shape of your life. I know when I got cancer, I was in like some of the best shape I've ever been. I was in college and I was super healthy, and when I got diagnosed, I couldn't believe it. It was like such a shock, you know?
I think again, like age too, like where you're at in your life, your focus is, especially in your 20s, or for me, just entering my 30s, is like, you're having fun, you're working on your career, you're the epitome of like, defining who you are. And then that's just turned upside down, which in the
Yeah.
end, by the way, I feel like is part of our journey. Like I wouldn't be who I am today if I didn't have cancer. It's literally changing my life.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. How has cancer changed your life, maybe for the better?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. It's crazy. Like we don't want to be those like people that, when you're just starting this journey, you almost don't want to hear it, but I think I learned a lot from other people. Also, like I remember hearing somebody say when they were diagnosed, they're like, I'm not going to let cancer change me, And then they thought, how foolish. Like, of course it's going to change you. And then you have to experience that for yourself. So for me, it's changed me in appreciation, just appreciating moments so much more than I would have before. And I mean, little moments, really little moments, just like hanging out with friends, hanging out with family. And now I have two young kids, just enjoying moments with them. I think it's helped to slow me down a little. But it's a reminder. It's something I work on all the time. And it's also changed my career path. I mean, I started YouTube to give back, to help people with symptoms that they were having through treatment, starting, chemo and then kind of vlogging my journey the second time I was diagnosed. And now it's led me to becoming a certified cancer coach, a certified life coach, and I'm starting to work with nonprofits to reach more people.
Okay. That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, well, just real quick, let's tell people where they can find you, like on YouTube, but where else can they find you or and reach out to you if they need any kind of help like that or support?
Yes, I'd love it. It's my first and last name, Marina Blackford. You can search it on YouTube. So I have lots of videos to support people on the cancer journey, particularly breast cancer, but chemo, radiation. And then it's my name on Instagram. You can find me there. It'll link to my Beyond Cancer Coach profile. And you can go to marinablackford.com, and that's where you can send me an email or book to call to talk to me about if you need coaching in your life.
Okay, cool. That's really, I think that's so cool that you took I always call it like tragedy to triumph. Like you took this thing that what some people could say, is like the worst thing that could happen to you, and you turned it into something like really positive, and you shared it with people, and you gave back, and I think it's just amazing that you're able to think like that about something that's happened in your life, and that that's why I started this podcast as well. I had beat cancer for the second time, and I was like, man, I have to share my story
Mhm.
somehow, and a podcast was a way that I felt like I could reach and help the most people possible. And, I really I got on here. I started sharing stories with fellow cancer survivors to try and inspire and motivate people, that they could overcome cancer, right? But like any challenges in their lives, like big and small. And so, yeah, I really love that you were able to take something like this and turn it into something positive in your life. I really respect that like a lot. So that's really cool.
Thank you. Same to you. It's incredible, really.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. So how was your support? Like, how were the people that you care about, how did they respond when they found out that you had cancer?
Oh man, I can remember it like yesterday. The first time I was told I had cancer, that feeling of, the unknown, right? What to expect. And then having to share that. At the time, my mom was a two-time breast cancer survivor. So she was the first person I told. And I remember on the phone telling her, and I actually didn't even have to tell her, right? She knew I had gone for the mammogram that didn't look good and then the biopsy. And when I called her and I couldn't talk, she said, "It's the C word, isn't it?" Like she knew it was cancer. And I felt a lot of emotion then. And we worked through it together. Having her as a survivor before me actually gave me a lot of hope, that I could go through treatment and come out on the other side like her. So that was really great. And then after telling a couple close people to me, my husband, I was dating him at the time, telling him, he responded so well, which is why we're married. But, just a supportive way. And cancer had touched his life. He had lost a brother in law to colon cancer about a year before. So he was so supportive. And then I gathered some of my best friends. I actually was having like a girl night. We were watching The Bachelor on TV, and I told them all at that girl night together, and just surrounded by support. So it really helped me to tell people. I felt a little bit of relief, like I wasn't alone. And then because I did have a big outreach, because I had a running group and a volunteer group, at some point I just shared it on social media within that next week. And again, it benefited me. Not everybody needs to be public about their journey, but since I knew I'd be losing my hair and be encountering a lot of circumstances, it was just easier for me to share it on social media. And I shared it from an aspect. I remember this is before Facebook created like the love button or the care button. It was only like, right? This is 2015. And I just said, I just qualified for Boston, as most of you know. And unfortunately, I was just diagnosed with breast cancer. But I'd like you to like this post to show your love and support, So I kind of guided that a little bit, as far as I didn't want everybody to say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Like, I wanted people just to say, we're here for you, we're praying for you. So you can also guide, how people might show up for you. Like, that's okay too.
I think that's a really big deal and a really good point. Like, I know, and I say this all the time, I always tried to lead by example with my attitude through my entire journey. And it was one for myself to
Hmm.
like, mentally like stay there,
Yep.
but also for anybody that supported me, cared for me, friends, family that knew me or were seeing me, that they felt confident that like I'm gonna beat this battle
Yes.
and everything's gonna be okay. I didn't want I didn't want to feel like a burden to people. And again, it was like that sense of normalcy. I didn't want to be
Hmm.
out with my people and my friends, and now they're looking at me some type of way
Yep.
because of something that's kind of out of my control.
Yep.
And, so that definitely helped me, like like you said, like guiding kind of your journey with the mentality through this whole process for sure. 100%.
So good. I think that's why maybe we found each other. You connected with me first here, but like that's so relatable to hear you say it back to me. I'm like, yeah, I did do that and you did that, and it's way more empowering again during a time when you feel like you don't have control over a lot.
Right. Yeah. Okay, cool. So, going through this whole experience, how did you feel about your doctors and the care that you were getting through your journey?
Yes. Well, being diagnosed the first time, I was called, right? I got the phone call. I'm at work, like you have an invasive breast cancer, and they gave me a number to a specialist to go see. So I did that, and it was fine. But what I ended up doing was actually reaching out to two friends of mine that worked at a cancer center. I knew them through work and my running group. And basically it was like, if you were to send your mom or yourself to somebody, who would you go to? So I got a referral from my oncologist, and that ended up being who I went with, because once I met with her, I felt like I understood my diagnosis better, and everything was gone over with me. Not not too much, but enough that I understood it better. So that's where I say, like, you don't have to go with your first doctor. You can, but maybe getting a referral would help. And also just feeling like you understand why the treatment plan is being recommended. Again, it kind of empowers, like, okay, now I understand why I'm doing it, so now I can go get this done.
Right. Yeah, I know. Like for me, like dealing with the doctors and trying to understand, like I was never like big on like the details, but I did
Yeah,
want to understand like why are we doing this, right?
right.
And right, I did want the information to make it clear. but I left the details in like the what ifs and
Mm-hmm.
like to my mom. Like my
Yep.
mom and I, we would go to every
Good cop, bad cop.
appointment
Yeah.
together. Yeah, exactly. And she would ask all the like detailed questions. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, after we made a decision, I'm like, yeah, let's do this. Let's go. Let's do this. I don't really care about all this stuff. I just want
Mm-hmm.
to like do it and get it done.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that was, super helpful. But man, right, we wouldn't be where we are without our doctors and
Yep.
without the support in our lives. So,
I love that. You have such a good point. I guess that's what I was trying to say too. You hit it on the head. It's like I understood why I was doing it, but my oncologist was really good about not giving me too much, statistics or, it was just, this is the type of cancer you have. This is what's recommended. And you need to start next week. And it was just like,
exactly.
yeah, it was just right. So I think connecting with your doctor is important. Yep.
Yeah, that was a big deal. I know, like, I remember, just like you, I remember when I was first diagnosed. Uh, the the first people that I knew were like my parents and
Mm-hmm.
my family that I was with, and it was over the holidays. And I remember talking to my dad, and my parents were probably more concerned than I was because, right, they're not feeling what I'm feeling. So, like, I can't really communicate how I'm feeling, only I know I'm feeling. And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm like pretty young. I was 19 at the time and I was extremely healthy. And so, like I said, I didn't even believe it honestly until like we
Mm-hmm.
got the actual diagnosis. And, they're super concerned. My dad is just like, I don't know if I've ever seen my dad like this, like anxious. He's just like, man, son, you have cancer. How do you feel about that? And again, leading by example with my attitude, I remember telling him, I don't know what's really going on. I don't really understand it all. But whatever it is, like we just have to do whatever we have to do and we just have to beat it.
That's
Right. And
awesome.
that was my mindset. And he talks about it all the time too, is that it gave him an extreme
Mm-hmm.
confidence in that I felt good about it, and that just was like a super pivotal moment. And obviously, that's when I figured out I had cancer. But that that really definitely helped through the whole situation.
That's so good. That's so good because now that I'm a parent, like I could only imagine having to hear that my child has cancer. It's be totally different. Like so, we know what we can do, what we can do. So that really is helpful for the family around you. Not that you always have
Yeah.
to be strong, but it does help.
Right. Yeah. So, going through all this, what were some of the toughest things that you had to deal with in this whole journey?
The initial diagnosis being told I would lose my hair and I would lose my breasts because of a genetic mutation that put me at high risk for breast cancer. So, as a young woman, that puts a lot of weight in that, really, our hair and our body, like being told that that would happen was hard. That was a moment for me. I remember crying and I remember even feeling bad about crying about it because I was like, I know it's just hair, but
Mhm.
that's when I also knew I was with the right team because I was in that room with my oncologist and her nurse navigator. They'll often have like what they call navigator or a nurse practitioner, but they were just acknowledge that, for me. They said, no, I mean, this is hard to hear, hard to deal with. So that emotionally was very hard.
Mhm.
But I can tell you from losing my hair and having surgery, it's not easy, but it's kind of like this healing. It's part of the process, almost like a healing process. Like I feel like I know more of who I am since I have had to kind of like not define myself by those things.
Mhm.
So it allowed me to just kind of find a little bit more of who I am, my voice, if you will. So those were hard. Other things that were hard to deal with, probably the setback, like the running setback. I made it to Boston, which was incredible. I ran the Boston Marathon 1 year after starting chemo, doing 16 chemo and having surgery. So that was fantastic. But physically regaining my journey after that, it was kind of like it was really hard to run as fast as I had, and
Yeah.
so that was something to kind of just work through, like what was my new normal, if you will.
Yeah, well, okay, so let's talk about that a little bit.
Hmm.
What was it like getting back, and have you been able to get back to a level that you were at before physically?
Physically, I would say I'm able to get back to a level I was before. So I ran the New York City Marathon last November. So a couple months ago, um, and that's the I hadn't ran a marathon since Boston. That's an 8-year
Hmm.
gap.
Oh
So to
boy.
be able to run another marathon, and I ran it well. I ran it exactly to my training. I finished at my goal time and pace. I mean, I felt good, but I
That's
was
awesome.
slower than I was 8 years before. But that could also
Okay.
just be time and age, and I have a young family now, so I find it just amazing that I was able to do it again and do it well.
Mhm.
So I'm very happy with where I am physically now.
That's awesome. I know for me, that's been something that's been tough. So I had two bone marrow transplants. My last bone marrow transplant was about going on 3 years ago now.
Hmm.
And like it was really hard. Like I'm not like a marathon runner, but I've always played basketball and sports my whole life and been in pretty good shape, like endurance wise as well. And so getting my wind back and getting in any type of like endurance and conditioning was very hard for me.
Hmm.
Like most previously, like the first time I beat cancer, I kind of got into shape like pretty quick and
Yeah.
got back real fast. And then this most previous time, it was really hard for me to run.
Hmm.
Like in my mind, as far as like being in shape, like I've played a lot of basketball, so like I do a lot of conditioning, and basketball is pretty fast paced. Like you're
Hmm.
sprinting up and down, right? I played
Sweating up a
soccer when I
storm.
was little.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so I've always been used to being able to do some sprints, right? And I never really felt like I was in tip-top shape unless I could sprint like for a certain amount of time, but then also, get a good run in for a certain amount of time. And this most previous time, I was never able to really get back to running. I was running like a mile at a time and it was really slow. And I was like, man, I can't really figure this out. And then my hips started to hurt. So, like, long story short, I have like necrosis in my hip
Mhm.
where I'm not getting blood flow to my hip and my bone is kind of like breaking down. So, like,
Mhm.
my conditioning now has just been like all like no impact stuff.
Mhm.
Because my goal was going to be to run a marathon. I was
Mhm.
like, okay, I did all this. I'm gonna run a marathon. It's gonna be an amazing story, right?
Yeah.
And I literally basically like have a dead hip right now, and so I've just all my conditioning has been like no impact. Like I swim in the pool, I
Good.
hit the spin bike a lot, and I'm in good shape. I just can't really run
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
um it hurts. It'll
Mhm.
start to hurt, but then like also like long term, I'm sure like it would affect me like a lot more than what I'm feeling right now.
No, that's a great point. I mean, you have to listen to your body. And I think how we define, how well we're doing could look different ways. For me, I am a runner. I do really enjoy it. And when I ran Boston, I said I don't want to run a lot more of these because marathons are very hard and time
Yeah.
consuming. But I said, but if I run one more, I would want to run New York. And my husband remembered that goal and brought it up, a couple years ago. And
That's awesome.
after having cancer again, he brought it up and said, we should get you there by 40. And I just had this moment this last year that I happened to see a post from a breast cancer nonprofit, last day to apply to run New York on their behalf. And I applied, and somehow they obtained an extra bib and like called me. So it was kind of like all meant to be.
Yeah.
And so running that marathon, like you said, I mean, I was a 2 minute slower mile pace than my previous
Mhm.
marathon. So my slowest marathon to date. But I had to redefine what my goal was. My goal was to finish in the time I had trained, which was a 10-minute mile. And I did that. And I'll share this just because I think it's really interesting. But through running New York, I was able to follow a couple more people on social or meet some more people like that ran for the nonprofit. But I found this one runner, and she is stage 4. I think it's Erin Keeps Running, ERIN. And she's stage 4. She has incurable breast cancer. And she ran New York also. So I didn't know her. I've just seen through social. And when I saw how she experienced New York as somebody that's living with an incurable, advanced breast cancer, she experienced that marathon totally different than me because she's not able to run the whole way. And there's a lot of people that run marathons for nonprofits because you raise money that aren't the professionals. Always hear like these people on social that are running under 6-minute miles or something and finishing in 2.5 hours. Like that's such an elite group of people. There's actually a
Right.
huge number of people that run marathons, that run walk 'em, that raise money for
Mm.
charity. And
Okay.
so she experienced that race by filming more of the crowd. She would stop and take pictures of funny signs and take selfies with like people and their dogs, like the whole course. So I couldn't tell you how long it took her. Maybe it took her like 6 hours to finish. But
Um,
man, did she take in that race like no one else. So
yeah.
I think defining what it looks like, like just it's different for all of us, and that's what's really cool too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's awesome to just be able to, like have that kind of perspective on what's going on. I know like after all this happened, my uncle, he was like, man, you're never gonna be, back. It's gonna be different. Like you're never gonna be is the same that you were. You're never gonna get back to there,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you're gonna have to be able to work with that and set a standard for yourself and rock with that and feel good about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say just in life in general, right? Like you can only do like the best that you can with everything that like you have right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't focus on what you've had in the past or what you might have or might get, like all you can do is the best that you can with everything that you have right now. And it's really important to be able to understand that and to be able to be present and be right here right now while you're here because you have so many things to be thankful for and like you said earlier, how cancer has affected you, and you're so grateful for so many little things. Like I'm grateful that like I can get up in the morning. I kind of like I always like I still love to sleep, but like I always loved to sleep a lot. Like I don't have a problem getting to sleep. Like I could totally like pass out in public and not feel any type of way about it. And after I had gotten cancer and gone through some of the stuff that I've gone through, I wake up like fresh, like ready to go, like so excited to just get out of bed because there was times when I didn't have the strength. I was in bed till like well into the afternoon. I couldn't even, muster up the strength or the energy to get up and get out. So yeah, the perspective that I have now, and I was always like a pretty positive person, and but like this kind of took that to another level of being grateful for everything that we have and how important that is to me.
I love it.
Um, how did you feel after all this was said and done
Mhm.
when like rang the bell for your treatments, got a clear PET scan and all that good stuff? How did you feel that you had like beat cancer?
Oh man. Each time I felt I felt amazing. I felt the flood of emotion like I did that. I believe a lot of the processing comes after treatment because in treatment, you're in such warrior mode in a way. Like, I have said, like, let's get this done, get me going, let's get through this. And after, it's a bit of processing. And I think because of the physical things like fatigue and wait, I'm not as fast or strong as I was. So I honestly though, I love all of it. I want to be so clear on that, Dom. I had to think about that as we're talking here. Like, I wouldn't change a thing. I know it's just crazy. Like, I wouldn't wish cancer on anybody and what you have to go through, but I just wouldn't change a thing. Like, it's absolutely led me to where I need to be. The first time I was dating my husband, and we were able to continue dating and fall in love during treatment. I mean, it brought our relationship together stronger. And then the second journey, I had a 2-year-old and a newborn, and I didn't know any other way. People were like, I can't believe you went through chemo and you had like a 2-year-old and a newborn, and it was literally the height of the pandemic. It was like end of 2020, early 2021. I just wouldn't change a thing. So to be able to ring the bell each time was an absolute like privilege, honor. I did that, and then you know figuring out what the next thing is.
Yes, I love that. It definitely, like you said earlier, it helped me like learn a lot about myself and who I am. And like I again, like just like you were saying, I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah.
It's led up to where I'm at. It's part of like who I am,
Hmm.
and I'm so happy, obviously, to have gone through it, but like to have gone through it and be able to come out on the other side and
Yes.
where I'm at now. So you said it was some of it was during the pandemic.
Yeah.
I know, like for me, like I had, like I said, I had two bone marrow transplants. One was before, and so like during that time, so like during a transplant, I'm basically quarantined to one floor on the hospital
Yeah.
with a whole bunch of other patients and super clean. And there's pretty strict guidelines on who can come visit. But
Hmm.
as long as you're clean, like the first time, all my friends were able to come visit. They'd bring me food. We could play little board games, watch movies, whatever. And it was a really good experience. And I really saw like who supported me in my life.
Hmm.
And it was really cool. The second time was during COVID, and I was only allowed one visitor the entire time. And so you're in the hospital for a month, right? And so it was only just me and my mom.
Yeah.
We would sneak my dad towards the end as I got like was getting better. We would sneak my dad into the hospital, like on the lower level, just so like I could like give him a hug and just
Yeah.
like say hi. Other than that, I'm
Yeah.
just like FaceTiming all my friends, and that's how we're checking up on each other. But can you kind of speak to the differences of what it was like before COVID and during COVID as far as dealing with your treatments? You had a family, like how was that?
So true. So the first time, and this is actually like in one of my probably my very first YouTube video called like chemo hacks. And you can tell it's my first because it's like the message is there, but it's lower quality video and sound, everything.
Okay,
And I'm like, bring a friend for support. It's like my last little tip in the chemo hacks.
yeah,
And it really did help me because the first time, again, I was at a very social point in my life, right? Like I had a running group and volunteering and coworkers. So I didn't go to one single chemo alone. Like it's almost like when people create a meal train, which they also did, by the way, like brought me some meals. They created like a chemo train, like who's going to take Marina to chemo? And
oh, that's cool.
it's funny. I remember one of my reactions to that was a little bit like, "Oh, this is such a personal thing. This is so weird. Like, how well do I know this person that might take me?" And it ended up being the best thing. Like it actually just made me feel the love from people. And so some of those people were just running group friends, I'd say, training for races with me, but they'd bring their laptop and work remotely or just whatever. There was no pressure. Like they were just like, "Do you need water? Do you need a snack? Do you need me to go get a nurse, a volunteer?" It was so helpful. Then the
That's
pandemic.
cool.
And
Yeah.
you're going to appointments alone and you're wearing a
Mhm.
face mask, which so it wasn't even so much going to the appointments alone. I mean, wearing a face mask, you guys, if you lived it, you remember it, but it's like you almost can't even interact with the people in the same room, like
Mhm.
where you might normally smile at somebody. You can't even tell if they're
Can't tell.
smiling. So I had to shift my thinking. And being a mom to young kids, I treated it as a self care time. So I took that iPad, I put on Netflix during chemo so I could ice my hands during chemo to prevent neuropathy. So I would watch a show, and when I wasn't icing my hands during chemo and I was there, I was actually learning how to edit in YouTube videos and make thumbnails. So I used the time as a creative time and a self-care time. I mean, I took like an eye mask because when they give you a pre-med of like Benadryl, you're so sleepy. So
Mm,
I took an eye mask because they can't shut down the lights in that room. And I would put on a
mm,
meditation, then it was like, okay, I'm awake. Let's watch a show, ice my hands. Like I just had to shift my thinking. I just had to totally
mm.
treat it differently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool. That's cool that you were able to do that. Um, cool. Well, so looking back on everything that you've gone through, what would you tell somebody that's maybe going through a cancer journey or is just going through some everyday challenges in their lives? What kind of advice would you give them to help overcome what they got going on?
Mm. I would give them the advice of never giving up. Like seriously, it's you can't let it be. That's just not an option. So we're gonna focus on what we can control. Your medical team, your symptoms, and then finding that support. What does that look like for you? The family and friends that'll be there for you. Leaning into that. And it's actually really hard. I feel like for a lot of adults, because most people will be adults when they're diagnosed with cancer, accepting help. Like we're so easy at saying, you know, and not saying yes, really. Like, and so if somebody says, like, is there anything I can help you with? Let me know. And they're not being specific. It really helps to keep a list, like on your phone or something, of things that might help you. So when somebody says, let me know if there's any way I can help, you have your list and you can say, oh, yeah, can you, pick me up some lunch? Can you walk my dog? Can you, like again, just what can you control and focus on that, and just getting through.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, I love that. Right? Like I think it's for one, it's important to communicate and this is like a crazy time in people's life
Yeah.
and people are not mind readers, right? So
Mm-mm.
I know even like dealing with like other people that were in like crazy situations, like trying to come to them, like it's hard to know like what they would want, right? And
Yeah.
so being able to express that and communicate to people like what you need, what will help you, what you want, like really helps people help you
Yep.
in so many ways because they want to help, but it's kind of probably scary to them just as much as it's scary to you. And they don't really understand, how you're feeling, and they're just trying to support in any way they can.
Yep.
And that can be actually a difficult, like on the flip side, that could be a difficult position to be in as well. And yeah, so that communication is definitely key because you know people aren't mind readers.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so I think that's it for today on this episode of Beast vs. Zombie. Thank you so much, Marina, for joining and sharing your story. Like you had so much insight on going through this journey and so much there's so much that we can take, and I hope people look at this
Hmm.
and can find inspiration and
Hmm.
motivation through this. We're just everyday people,
Yep.
just,
We all
just like
are.
you. And, we have challenges and everyday things going on. And this was something that we were able to overcome. And like she said, and like you said, I really think is really cool. You have to focus on the things that you can control in your life. And, you can't focus on past and future
Yeah.
and, and stuff that's out of your control because then you start focusing on a lot of things and it can get overwhelming and kind of chaotic. And I always say that it's really important to try and keep things as simple as possible.
Yeah.
Um, so thank you
I love it.
again so much for joining and sharing your story today. Um, again, before I go into it, share again where people can find you and what they can look for.
Yes. Yeah, you'll go to YouTube, you'll type in Marina Blackford, Ford. But I do 2 live chats a month. So if you subscribe, you'll get notifications for when those are. And you can hop on and ask your questions and feel supported in an awesome community. I love it. And you can find me at my name, marinablackford.com. And I just want to thank you, Dom, before you go. Like, this kind of stuff takes time, it takes editing. What you're doing is absolutely helping people, and it's so inspirational. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And make sure to go follow the podcast at BeastvsZombie on all social media platforms. Make sure to get on YouTube and Spotify and subscribe so you can stay up to date on new episodes every other week and you can see the full videos of the podcast. Have a great day, everybody. Be a beast.
Love it. Thank you.